Yeah, that was the style.
It's
70s and 80s.
better.
Yep.
All right, folks, let's go ahead and get started here.
Yep.
I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. The time is 5:30 on the nose. Shirley, you want to go ahead and take a roll call?
Already, Lonnie Greenville,
Here.
Sarah Thompson,
Here.
Mike Baker,
Here.
Kat Stone here, Janice Baker here, Tom Trotter.
Here.
Mark Hendershot. Not yet.
We're standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please. I pledge allegiance
Allegiance
to
to the flag of the United States of America,
the
to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We need to remember to mute that next time.
You have to try to just tune
Yeah.
that part out.
It throws you, huh?
It does. Yeah, Tom, you're about a cadence behind us here.
Yeah. Internet connection, I guess.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mhm.
All right, item number 4, consent agenda. We have 4.1, November 8th, 2021, regular meeting minutes, and 4.2, November preventive maintenance reports. And both of those should have been in your packets.
And I actually think the preventive maintenance.
It got
report
emailed
went
out this
today.
afternoon.
It was emailed out, yeah.
Yeah.
I did have a question on what it meant. So there was like a certain number and then there was
Oil
like a certain
changes,
that
yeah.
were acceptable.
Yes, what it means is that we have not been monitoring as closely as we need to. And so during the site review, the pass or fail is at 85%. And out of the 27 preventive maintenance services that were completed, only 13 were within that 500 plus or minus guideline. And that leaves us at a 48% rate, which is really just not okay.
And that was at the end of last fiscal year, right?
Yeah,
by
so
July 1st.
I started with a
okay.
a baseline, the closest to July 1 as I could get. So
Mhm.
some of them, those were in May or June, but most of them were right around the first.
Oh,
of
it's
July
July 1st.
forward.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay. I thought it was before July 1st.
No, it's just the last 5 months. So as I looked a little closer, what I found is that 6 of those services were performed within 100 miles of that goal, of that 500 plus or
Mhm.
minus. So like 566 miles instead of 500 miles. And so if those had actually been within compliance, that still would have only put us at 74%. We would have needed 23 out of 27 to be within that plus or minus 500 miles to actually meet 85%. But honestly, there's just no reason for us not to be getting 100%. We have the software to track this stuff. The drivers are putting their mileage in every single day. And so it's just something we need to monitor better.
So what are we doing? What are we gonna do different? If we already had that stuff and we didn't meet it, what are we doing differently going
They're
forward to meet it?
reporting to me every week.
Okay.
Yeah, we gotta bring it up. So.
Any other questions?
I'll move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
We have a
I'll
motion.
second.
Sarah seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, passed unanimously. Item number 5, Sherry, you want us to take through the financial report?
Sure. About this time of year, we should be at about a 41%, like on the overall percentage of, the budget for this year. Most of those categories are hitting right around there. The income is slightly still under, but we just started receiving the first quarter reimbursements, so those should post by the end of December. I think we're only waiting on one thing. So income looks really good, aside from the fact that we haven't received all the reimbursements for Q1 yet. Medical transport still continues to be a really good positive additional revenue for us. Year to date, we've cleared 28,278. We just recently created a separate bucket for medical transports and the expenses under expenses so that we can, for better accountability and tracking of the expenses. This month, you're going to see some additional expenses under the medical transports because we're planning a Christmas party, and the medical transport drivers will also be in that. So that party is scheduled for this Saturday. We're going to have some catered food and we're going to do it over at the UCC campus.
Okay.
So we're going to have some games and prizes and make it a nice end of year party for everybody. I think might help, keep the morale boosted and going into the new year. So the funds for the medical transport is the only funds that are not bound by any restrictions by the federal, state, or local governments. So we're gonna deduct some of those expenses for the party against the medical transports, but we still cleared 28,000 so far overall with December's numbers. Dues and memberships are slightly over budget, but that's there was 2,900 in DMV fees this year for all of the buses being re-registered from UCAN, correct? To our current, to the district. Also, there was an annual membership for SDAO and OTA that just was not really budgeted for, so for 2022.
Yeah, I didn't think we had some before because we didn't own the buses or whatever. So,
Exactly,
yeah,
yeah,
it's
so
based on how many
we'll
vehicles we
just,
have.
we're gonna be starting to build budgets anyways, and we'll be budgeting off the actuals, which will, make it a little more
Tighten it up a little bit.
diary. Mhm. So all in all, I mean, the expense categories are around the 41% mark, which is right where they should be this time of year. And where we've gone over on certain areas and expenses, we've kind of gone, we've been able to save in other categories to kind of offset it. So all in all, we have a really good foundation for projecting next year's budget, I think.
Perfect. Motion to accept the November financial reports.
Moved.
Mike? For a second?
I'll second.
For a second, any discussion? Hearing none? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, pass unanimously.
And I believe we have Mark Peterson has joined us.
Okay. Item number 6, public comment for on-agenda items only. So do we have anything from anybody on agenda items? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on. Item number 7, new business. 7.1, security and acceptable use policy. Cheryl?
Yes, so this is recommended by special districts as a best practices for ensuring that our all of our electronic security is actually secure, and that people understand what they're allowed to do with their computers here, with their computers at home, those kinds of things. And so this is the policy that is actually provided by special districts. I spoke with Matt Chappell over at Portec, and he indicated he thought this was a really good comprehensive policy and that he would not have any issue being able to easily implement it. The one thing that we don't do right now is we don't require everybody to have a multi-factor authentication. It is just, I believe you do. Yeah, so Sherry, Christine, and I are the only ones that have the multi-factor identification. Well, you have to use the authenticator on your phone and type in the code. So that would extend then to everybody. And we have not implemented the need to change your password every 90 days. And so that.
That
Some
one
of
is
those
so
things-
ugly.
Yeah.
Can we leave that out?
That's actually the standard.
It is so
I know
horrible.
it is, but
Uh-huh.
that's what the IT standard is. Are they
Yes.
recommending a passphrase versus a password in here? Or they have the? No, they don't.
There is not.
This is the one that you sent out right after the meeting, wasn't it? Okay, because I
Yes.
read that. I'm gonna read
Yes, so this is the one that we were laughing because we had just
Just,
gone over it, but we hadn't had it prepared to present to you guys yet.
We went through a similar thing at work and your insurance company sent a bunch of stuff out and we had some online training. And almost everything that was in this is what they covered. It's kind of a standard. So
Yes.
it's very, very close.
Yes.
just because it's standard doesn't mean it's right.
No.
I hate it.
Well, the interesting thing is that changing your password every 90 days really could save you in the end. you
Now,
know?
I believe that, but I also think it's such.
It is a pain.
Yes, yes.
You just have your password. Start with a 1, and
Yeah.
then you go to a 2, and then a 3, and that way if you forgot it, you only have to go back like
Yeah,
back or
only
forth
a
so many
few,
times.
only a few.
Yeah.
I like the apps that have switched to thumbprint.
Oh,
Biometric.
Yeah.
So
Biometric, it's much easier.
Yeah, I'm almost ready to do that with my phone. I didn't
That's
want
what I do.
Android to know my thumbprint, but I'm tired of punching in my birthday.
now we all know how to get in your phone.
So if everybody's comfortable with the policy, I'll entertain a motion to approve the security and acceptable use policy.
So moved.
All right, Cass made the motion. Do I have a second?
Second,
Janice made second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I assume this includes all the tablets, so, the drivers use, all that stuff.
So these next two kind of go hand in hand.
Sure.
Yeah.
Item 8.1, accounting and financial policy and procedure manual. So we'll go ahead and jump into that one and then we'll step into the second part of that, the executive committee. So, Cheryl?
So there were a number of recommendations for changes made at the last meeting, and Sherry has gone in and made all of the changes, and we returned this with those changes. We did have one question though, because what we missed in our case was and I knew I should have wrote down what page it was.
105.
Kids retention. Yeah.
Thank you,
Thanks, Sarah.
Sarah.
Because we do have a pretty healthy records retention policy that you guys just passed recently.
Mhm.
And so we have the opportunity to shorten this by a few pages and point directly to that policy, or you can leave the more specific references in here, but we just need to then check them each year as we approve the
I don't think you
policy.
want to do that. You want to have the reference to one policy. Otherwise you create a possibility of conflict.
Conflict, yep. Okay, so we want to, oh, well, I guess you guys need to,
Discuss it.
yes.
So what we're gonna do is take this out and just reference what we did last month.
Mhm.
I think that's good.
Okay. Oh, and the other piece of it is, this policy references the executive committee,
Mhm.
which is the next item on the agenda. And the makeup of the executive committee is something that you, as a board, were discussing last month. I did reach out to Coos County Area Transit, as they were the ones that had provided the example of the policy. And they're set up a little bit different than we are. The reason their executive committee is all board members is because they don't have any employees. Their whole operation is subcontracted to a nonprofit. So their general manager and everything is done through Quebec, which is the nonprofit over there. That's kind of the equivalent of UCAN. So
What's an economic development arm of the county? It's a little different, I think you
Oh,
can,
is
but
it?
yeah, it's,
It's not.
so it's weird. It'd be like the partnership here in Douglas County running the transit system.
Yeah, so it's a little different.
Yeah.
So I guess that still leaves the composition of the executive committee up to you guys and for discussion and decision.
So before we dive into the executive meeting, let's go ahead and address the accounting and financial policy and procedure manual.
So there's also another note on there about guidelines for insurance coverage. Did that get resolved?
Okay, yes. And Christine is the one that was prepared to speak to that.
That was right around the same section, I believe.
It's right at the
It's
top
on
of
the
the
same-
page.
Page 105.
Yeah.
Same page, yeah.
Just says, does the board wish to retain guidelines or reflect our current coverage?
I think we should
That's right.
reflect our current coverage if we're gonna make it an adopted policy.
Yeah, I mean, we could have guidelines in here, but it should reflect what we currently have.
Right.
Okay, and we did just meet with the insurance provider on Friday and made some inquiries as to different levels of insurance and adding some things in that we don't currently have. So that coverage will like that in about a month.
So I think in our last discussion, I don't think you guys said you had an umbrella policy. Is that correct? And now you're going to it? That,
So the, it's on my paperwork here, hold on. We discussed increasing our GL limits from 5 million to 10 million. And so that's where the umbrella policy, it actually is. But if we do it through special districts, there are advantages to it rather than doing it through an outside entity like Travelers.
as long as there's one place.
And we actually have that kind of coverage now, but we're talking about updating the amount. So the way special districts looks at it apparently is that there's really no need for us to have more than 5 million. So we've put the request in and they're going to look at the risks associated with what we do because they want our coverage to be really specific to what we're doing. They don't want to charge us for something that we don't actually need. So that is under review, as well as adding the non-owned hired liability for the volunteer drivers. So that in the event that there was a catastrophic accident, that we would be able to be a secondary.
So if I'm hearing everything that's in there, I think we can have this because everything that you're talking about exceeds what's in the coverage guidelines. And the coverage guidelines, I think, are fair. So I don't think there's any issue
Okay.
with.
You think it says the same thing?
I think it says.
Well, this says
is
it's a minimum.
And what we
Okay.
have exceeds what we have as a minimum. So,
Yes.
Yeah, that.
so I'm fine. I think it's
That's
fine.
fine.
Okay.
Okay.
So we'll leave the guidelines and just keep you updated as to our coverages, make sure that always meet or exceed.
Right.
Okay.
So do I need to just change the retention policy and then we'll get it back out to the next board meeting? Or,
Yeah, I don't think there's a reason that we can't defer it until January and are we in a rush to get this approved? So, okay. So we'll go ahead and move that to the next meeting. Let's go ahead and go to 8.2. Executive committee.
So the executive committee that is referred to in the financial policy is not defined. And so that's a conversation that you guys as a board had started during the last meeting. And as we talked amongst ourselves in between then and now, the thing that we had each kind of expressed the same concern was, how would we know, how would you guys know if you were the only ones on the committee, if one of us was doing something that we weren't supposed to, you know? So kind of looking at what we would do, you know, how, I mean, I know that I could bring something to you guys as the committee, but what if it was me that was doing something wrong? Would anybody else feel comfortable doing that? So.
The makeup of the sub of this committee wouldn't change based on who's on it. I mean, if the committee's not gonna know, I mean, as the general manager, it's your responsibility to bring that to the executive committee if you're on it or not.
Okay,
And if you're doing something, being on the executive committee, you're less likely to let us know than if you're not, so.
well, that's true, huh?
It seems kind of weird to be on the committee. A general manager
Yeah.
usually is not part of a committee or.
They're almost like an ex officio where they're,
Gotcha.
They
come
are,
to the
they're
meeting.
staff.
Yeah.
They're the staff person to that. But you're not a member of the committee itself.
Yeah.
But you're supposed to be there. You should be there because you're the staff to it.
right,
Mhm. Yeah. so
very, very
this-
much like this setting
Exactly
here.
like this, yeah.
Yeah, this is new to me. I've never seen an executive committee associated with the financial policy like that before, so.
The way I've seen it in the past is the officers of the board are on it, and typically maybe an ex officio or a past president. But that's,
Yeah,
One way.
that's how I've usually seen it. So I mean, so it'd usually be the chair, the vice chair, and in a 7, we would have probably one more person.
Mhm.
Who's been past chair, but it could be really anybody that wants to be on it, so, yeah. But usually it's it, but I would suggest that we're not, if we create an executive committee, that we need bylaws for that, and there may be other opportunities to use that. So for example, you go take a job somewhere else, and now we need to do a search, or we need to do something like that. I mean, there could be some of the work that's done in the committee,
Mhm.
no decisions.
Right.
Work that's done in the committee and a recommendation made then to the full board
Yeah.
for how to move forward. So there may be some opportunities to use, that's typically how an executive committee is used, is like some things like that are board related and don't have to take up a ton of time at a board meeting.
Mhm.
You do the work ahead of time and bring it to the board.
That makes sense too.
So it's like an informational. kind of-
It's a, think of it as a work group
Mhm.
that does the work or the analysis, or that has a lot of discussion. And from all of these thoughts or ideas formulates a recommendation to the board. And maybe they're sharing some of that background and some of that, but you get to have all that talk about, sometimes all those hours of discussion kind of synthesized a little bit at the board meeting without having to go through all the junk that, you know,
Yeah.
it weeds it kind of out for the board.
Yeah,
But if you say the other person could be just anybody, you know, what does that mean?
From the board, any other board members.
Okay,
board
all right,
members.
yeah, because I don't want any county commissioners.
No.
No, yeah, I think it should be made up entirely of just board members.
Yeah.
And so, but chair, vice chair, and somebody else from the board.
I think that's a great makeup, is chair, vice chair, and one other person who
Can it
Can-
like
can
be
be- can
rotating,
just-
whoever is
be,
interested in the
absolutely.
subject? 'Cause I think that would be.
And that's why you would have bylaws too, to help define all of that, yeah.
Yeah, okay, let's go with that.
Yeah.
Unless Sarah doesn't like it.
I'm good with it.
But, you know, I mean, and so there's probably some executive committee bylaws out there.
Mhm.
Some examples, but I think it ought to just be more than just financial.
Okay.
It doesn't mean that we're gonna meet on any of those, and executive committees that I've been part of, you don't always meet, it's not like on a regular
Right.
schedule, sometimes it's as needed.
as part of the bylaws, you would have what's in here as part of those bylaws, but it's gonna cover other things as well.
All right. So is that bylaw something you would like me to find and bring back for you? Or is that something that the committee would define, like when they meet?
The board needs to approve the bylaws for the executive committee.
So,
you would amend your board bylaws to have an executive committee, but then your executive committee would have its own set of bylaws. It's just
So,
it's an advisory group to the board, basically.
Okay, sort of like this, only different.
so I guess I would entertain a motion to approve resolution 21-7, creation of the executive committee with the members to be the chair, the vice chair, and one other appointed from the current board.
And I like Kat's idea of rotating. I think that's probably a good idea.
I mean, part of the bylaws.
Yeah.
Second part of that is also to include the creation of bylaws to govern the executive committee. So that, I guess that'd be kind of framed motion.
Okay, so
so moved.
second,
So we have Kat who made the motion. We have Mike who seconded. Any discussion on any of that? Hearing none, I'll take it to.
Lonnie, oh, sorry, Lonnie, this is Ron Sperry.
Yeah,
So I guess want to make sure is the motion to create an additional separate set of bylaws for the executive committee or to add them to the bylaws of the transportation district?
create the separate bylaws for
Okay,
the executive committee.
so we'd be amending the bylaws of the current bylaws for the board, the entire board, to show
Right.
that we're an executive committee, but then have some bylaws separate from that, much like the stiff stack committee on how it'll operate.
okay. So I was just gonna say that, well, and that's a fine motion. I mean, typically, as long as those bylaws, as long as the bylaws for the transportation district authorize the creation of separate bylaws for that committee. So you may be doing an amendment to do that and create that. So I just wanted to bring that up. Or they can be in the body of the bylaws, but then I think then you can see how complicated that gets when we have.
I think, Ron, the bylaws already say something to the effect that the board can create subcommittees.
And
It does.
The budget.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm not arguing that. But typically what I see is that then if there is a subcommittee authorized, a lot of times in the organizations I've been in, they have me create what the subcommittee can do as part of the bylaws of the overall organization. What decision, but it's an advisory board is really what it comes down to.
Correct. And I think it's okay to do it this way, only because, I mean, yeah, you could do it that way, but I think this way you're defining that in the bylaws, and then you can sort of as its own bylaws, and then you can summarize that a little bit in the overall board bylaws in terms of what it's created for.
Point to them.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. All right. Just wanted to make sure I understood how that was going to interact with the main bylaws. Okay. Thanks.
Sure. So all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, it passes unanimously. And we'll, create an example, and then we'll need to have probably our next meeting as an item to amend our board bylaws to reflect that.
Yes.
Second, sign this.
So do we need to go back, or did we take care of the financial?
We're gonna do that next meeting when they update it. Okay, item 8.3, board bylaws review, and apparently this will dovetail right into that conversation.
Yes, so attached are the board bylaws to the cover page. And this is from the request to review the composition of the board. And so I had asked Ron to be here just to weigh in on the legal aspect of that. And we can go from there.
I didn't bring my lawyer.
Yeah, that's for the board. So
And so is this, you guys want to hear from me now or?
Yep.
Okay, I didn't know if there was further discussion. So, I mean, I talked to Cheryl a little bit and we've done this before, right? There was a previous bylaw and policy changed regarding whether service providers or members of the boards of service providers could serve on the board of the transportation district. And the board unanimously, I think it was unanimously decided to amend the bylaws to prohibit that, because we did have, I think at that time, a sitting board member or maybe an executive of a service provider. And so I think this is a perfect segue, like Lonnie said, into, from the previous subject to this, is that what I told Cheryl is that I would probably recommend exactly what you've done, is to create an executive committee to review the policy in question, because I think it's a fair consideration. The executive committee can make a recommendation, can draft a recommended bylaw regarding, I think, the issue of what I think and correct me if I'm wrong, this issue is regarding how the board is composed in the future, right? Whether there's going to be conflicts, or whether, I think the direct question from the last meeting was regarding spouses sitting on the board together. Is that correct?
Yes.
And so I think that the board can have the executive committee do research and look at that. There are some recommendations for best practices. There's nothing illegal about it. There's nothing untoward about it, unless unless there's something going on that might violate an ethics rule, such as people getting compensation or organizations getting compensation because there's a power block, a voting block on the board or something. And so I think it's a fair question, but I think ultimately the executive committee, as Lonnie and I think what people have said, is it would make a recommendation. Whether the board follows that is up to the board. And so I think that, it's helpful to have executive committees to review these policies, summarize them so that each board member does not have to do that, and then present that information to the board for a motion and a vote on whether that policy, is something that the transportation district wants to do. And that's, I think you guys did a great job in looking at that regarding the last time that issue arose, and there was a vote and an amendment to the bylaws. So that's really all I had on there. I think that it's a good idea that you're going to have an executive committee put together, and how that's composed, you guys, I think, are still discussing. I think I heard that, it maybe just be board members, or, but either way, I just wanted to be clear that the executive committee doesn't make the final decision, right? It's going to make a recommendation based on an objective analysis of what do other businesses do, what is the best practices, what are the cautions, what are the pros, cons, and is this something that we want to do, and how regularly do we want to amend the bylaws. But ultimately, it's going to require a motion and support from the rest of the board to change a bylaw.
So Ron, I guess I would just say, thinking about this, I think there's a significant difference between the action that was taken by the board last time in relation to service providers and employees, and this one, which is based on marriage or familial relationships. And the difference is, in the last one, it was actually authorized by the legislature. So legislature had that opportunity, had that option, that special districts and others had the ability to exclude certain participants from being eligible to be voted on. And otherwise our bylaws really don't speak to the voting requirements, nor do we have that authority to set the standards for who's eligible to be elected to a district. And I guess my third point would be that, I think that would also be illegal under, Title 6, I think, or the executive order under discrimination on marriage. So I think it opens the board up to a lawsuit from not possibly just us, but potentially any other ones. I can think of lots of city councils that have or have had married people or father and son or different type of family relationships on serving on the council at the same time. We see it in the Congress. So, I mean, we see it in different forms all the time. So it just seems something, it's, I think like Ron said, you know, you have to be careful in terms of conflict of interest. I think you have to be careful in terms of, you know, if the two of us were talking to two other members of the board, then potentially we have formed a quorum. And so that communication, I think, is probably the biggest piece that you really have to be careful with. So I would just urge caution in this matter. I think
Well,
it's.
right. And Mike, I don't want you to misunderstand that I would be in support of a limitation. I think that this is a perfect example of what the executive committee could help assist the board in doing the research, looking at it. I definitely think research is warranted. You know, there's no, for instance, if this were not a government agency, right? There's no law excluding spouses from serving on board members generally, but let's say a private organization definitely could limit it. I've been looking into the research as far as whether the special district has the authority to say, well, you know, if there's a spouse serving, the other spouse may not run. That's the question I'm looking into, and frankly, I don't have a definite answer. And so I'm not leaning one way or the other. I think where it gets hairy, you know, for the district, like as you stated, is this is not an appointment situation. This is an elected position. And it's very important to make sure that, just like we discussed, I think when we talked about having the, you know, board members of a service provider not sitting on the board of this organization, we looked into that. You know, is this going to narrow, or is it going to restrict or limit unconstitutionally the people who can serve on the board? Now, like Mike, you said that the state legislature specifically authorized this kind of limitation, that kind of limitation, in order to avoid what I can only imagine would be a potential nasty conflict of interest at some point. So all I'm saying is that if there's a question or the board wants to debate it, I think it's better than everybody doing their own independent research to actually form that executive committee and task the executive committee with doing the research and looking at this issue. That's why I just thought it was a great segue. I don't have an answer on the points that you brought up, whether or not it would be a form of discrimination. You know, I'd have to look at that. But my concern would be is this the result of you know, and this is to everybody. I mean, I'm not saying like, but is this the result of a you know, specific issue that's developing on the board, or is this, you know, did this come about because it's just a general policy question? Those are also things, you know, those are also things everyone needs to consider. I'm doing the research, you know, to find the answer, and I'd be more than happy to assist an executive committee at some point in what I find, or at least report to the executive committee what I find, and then the executive committee can make a recommendation, or at least inform the board what the research is and what's being pointed to. That's kind of where I was. I just, you know, I think everyone needs to be careful about, you know, if everyone went off and did their own research and then came back with their own opinion, we're going to have a 9-hour debate on this, and we still might. So
yeah, and you know, when you're talking about this stuff, so it's kind of interesting if you take a look at the county clerk's office in terms of the qualifications for office for the Douglas County. For that Douglas County, for the Umpqua Public Transportation District, is you actually don't have to be a resident of Douglas County. Did you know that?
No.
Isn't that was a surprise to me?
That's interesting. I would have assumed you would have to be.
I would think so, because that's what we cover, but it was very specific that it very clear that it's not. So I thought that was actually that was something I thought was really interesting. If you're looking at stuff, that would be.
Who wrote that job?
It's just you know how things are created and how things are done. And
So I guess to Ron's recommendation, and I do think a prudent way to go about it is for us to go ahead and establish, we already have established the executive committee, allow us to put together the bylaws and then address the issue, to do the research, working with Ron, on the, I guess the job description for, board members. What are the qualifications? Do we want to have any? And
I don't think it's a job description. I think the question was, what are the qualifications to serve on the board?
so,
Well, it seems like it's a job description in a vague kind of way. And if we have left it open, or whoever wrote it, because it didn't just make itself, it didn't just birth itself. Whoever wrote it didn't address that you should be living in Douglas County.
Well, I think that's a special district kind of thing. It's kind
Is
of,
it?
yeah. I
Yeah,
think so.
okay.
Yeah, so it's, I mean, the rules are pretty basic. 18 and over, citizen of the United States, registered to vote,
Yeah, somebody didn't look at it. Somebody just boilerplated it.
But I mean, right, I mean, that totally caught me by surprise, because there were other ones, as you looked at them, that, had requirements to reside within the boundary of what you do, but I thought, geez, really, somebody could live in Cottage Grove or in,
Grants Pass or
Josephine County
anywhere.
and do something, yeah, so, or Coos Bay, so it's like.
So that sounds like an oversight somewhere,
so
and something that's changeable, something.
it is.
Potentially, I don't know that that's changeable either, because I think a lot of this stuff is established by the legislature.
Right.
So it may take a legislative action to make a change.
So we'll have the executive committee look into that and make a recommendation back to the board, with Ron's assistance.
Good plan.
Okay, moving on to item number 9, general manager report. Cheryl?
Okay, so it's been a really interesting month because we actually got a qualified application for operations manager. So a number of conversations led to he actually came here to meet with us and met with our whole team, with all of our supervisors, Sherry and I, and Christine and Selena and Shelley. We had a conversation that lasted probably pretty close to an hour, where he asked questions, we asked questions, there was a lot of interaction. Got a tour of the facility. He comes with 17 years of operations, transit operations experience. Started out as a driver, moved up through the ranks as supervisor, manager of fixed route, and paratransit and demand response services. Started in a system that was not a district when he became a driver, but it became a district within about 3 years after he became an employee. And so he's been through this process of starting with the district.
From Oregon, or is he from a different state?
Flagstaff, Arizona.
No.
Yeah, and so I did make an offer, and he has accepted the offer and is in the process of trying to find housing. He's given notice to his position there, and I'm super
Great.
excited. Yeah.
Do we have trial service here too?
Pardon?
How old is he?
Oh, I don't know.
Rough estimate.
I'd say late 40s maybe.
Yeah, I'd say
Okay.
younger than me.
I just
Okay.
say it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Well,
Good answer.
So the interesting thing is some of his philosophies were word for word what I tell my drivers, or in meetings when we have employee meetings. It is easier to find somebody that has a customer service attitude and train them to drive a bigger vehicle than it is to take somebody who already has the ability to drive the vehicle and try to teach them to be nice, And I say that all the time, and he just popped right out with that. I was like,
So why is he Oregon? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. This
Like Flagstaff's such a bigger community than Roseburg, and the
yeah.
climate is obviously quite different.
Well, and so he also helped grow that system from about 16,000 rides to almost 1 million rides in the last 17 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so the software and technology that he has helped implement is the same types of software and technology that I've been working toward implementing, but had not. Now that we have the money to do these things, I didn't have the time. We really need somebody that, can focus on that. So he has the experience. He's walked through it. He knows what works, what doesn't work. And
You're finally the third leg of the stool. All right.
yeah,
Good deal.
yeah,
Very personable, and
Yeah.
I think everybody got the same feeling about him.
yeah,
He was-
Very good.
yeah.
Do you have trial
So,
service?
pardon?
Do you have trial service?
What do you mean?
In other words, you can fire them within whatever certain amount of time, 6 months or a year, the typical ones, if they didn't work out without
Isn't that standard
No.
of
Without going through all the-
probationary period?
progressive discipline, you can just say, no, it's not working out.
Probationary period.
So no, we go through special districts. Anytime that we want to let somebody go, we have to provide the situation to special districts. They review it, they come back to us, they ask for whatever kind of documentation is needed. And if we don't have it documented well enough, they'll tell us you have to do this, 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 and this before you can move forward. They have
Have you ever
lost,
considered trial service?
we never have.
It's a good practice.
Yeah,
It's when you have a 'cause sometimes they look really good or they sound really good and then it's just not working out.
yes.
And
I
rather than
experienced
having
that.
to go through all that process and show that, if you have trial service, you can just, you're done. And you don't have to do anything. That's it.
The end.
Yeah.
So maybe we could look at implementing something like that, but we don't have it right now.
Yeah, I would recommend that you look at that.
Yeah.
He has family in Northern Cal and then in Washington State, so this is kind of a
Get closer.
halfway point
Yeah.
for him.
Yeah.
That's
Good
good.
deal.
Excited to have them.
Yeah.
And so we also went through our quarterly report process and COVID reporting, chart of us reporting. Got our reimbursement requests turned in, and we have one report left, which is due day after tomorrow, but it should be done tomorrow. And so the things that we have had on the goals, we're getting there. We are so close now. And then, of course, we did a lot of work through the preventive maintenance process, just trying to get a better grip on what they're doing and how they're doing it and how we're missing the mark, and making sure that there's the understanding that 50 miles, doing it at 550 miles over or under as opposed to 500 miles, that 50 miles makes a difference in our compliance. So just doing a little bit of education and teaching, I think that we have good people doing the work. We just need to monitor a little bit better. And then pretty much all of the rest of this is just the stuff that we've been doing, as you just move through the reporting process, and then you get with NPD, they always come back with validation issues. So you open that up and look at what the issue is, answer the question for them, and that closes the issue. And they usually come back every year at least 2 or 3 times. So we made it through the first round, so probably have a couple more to go by spring. And that's the National Transit Database that asks those questions. I also met with our preventive maintenance vendor. And so part of the process when we did the site review and identified the preventive maintenance intervals were not always being met, we went through the owner's manual. We defined those by the book. They are the recommended preventive maintenance intervals by the manufacturer. They have for each one of our vehicles 3 different levels of service. And so we had gone with the middle level, which was the city service. And it defines what that is, lots of stops and starts and, a heavy load or not a heavy load, that kind of stuff. So that had changed the preventive maintenance level from 5,000 every 5,000 miles to 7,500 miles on multiple vehicles. And what he said is in those vehicles now that he's had them all through at least once and some of them through a couple of times, is that he's recommending that we go to the severe wear level of service, which is back to the 5,000. And that's because the filters are not just dirty anymore, they're black, and they're not catching everything in the gas, like the gas filters. And so that extra 2,500 or 5,000 miles that these vehicles are going, depending on which kind they are, is actually, it's running the potential of causing worse damage and not catching things as quickly as we would normally. So
Are these all gas engine versus diesel?
most of them are diesel. So the 5 internationals are all diesel. And actually, so are 4 of the Fords. One of the Fords is a gasoline engine. So the preventive maintenance policy is something that was approved by the board. So what I can do is make a change to the policy that says, based on the recommendation of our preventive maintenance vendor, due to these issues, we are changing on this date.
Can I make a recommendation on that?
Mhm.
Since you have a new operations person going to come on board, that's kind of probably going to be in his wicket. Maybe we wait and let him take a look at that.
Sure.
Well, even the electrification piece, because that's becoming a big deal. You got all these vehicle makers that are now saying we're gonna stop making gas cars by 2035, or, and the push by the state and federal government to push electric charging stations and they have technology, I heard, that's starting to change where you could fill up your electric car as fast as you can a gas car.
Oh, wow, that's interesting.
So that's a game changer right there, if you can do that.
Mhm.
So I like where we're going with that, but let's let our new guy help us
Okay,
out with that.
so that would give us, well, just another 6 weeks of 7,500 to 10,000 miles on those vehicles instead of 5,000 miles. Or do we want to change that interval sooner? So
I
that
think
we
we
don't
should
run into
address it.
issues?
I would do it soon.
Address it sooner and make it for our vendors' suggestion.
But he may be able to help establish some of the processes and things like that. When
The
he
only
comes on
reason why I'm
board.
suggesting or questioning that is typically when you change the oil, you change the oil filter.
Right.
And that's going to be the part that's cleaning the oil. The gas doesn't have or the diesel doesn't have anything to do with it. It's a completely different part of the engine. So as long as you're changing your filters out at the same time you're changing your oil, if you're getting high on mileage on those, the 7,500, especially if you're using a synthetic, now that would be something I want to question is, are you using a regular oil or a synthetic? If you're using a synthetic, then 75 to 10,000 miles is not a problem. If you're using regular oil, then absolutely needs to be 5,000. So that's the one I would question is what
Or
type of
less. for that
3,500 to
size
5,000,
vehicle. Yeah.
But if we're paying this vendor to manage it, then we should put the responsibility there.
So I suspect the internationals are all just regular oil, and I would have to look up in the book whether or not they're synthetic in the Fords. I don't think there is. I believe we might have.
They're high mileage
Shelley.
oils too.
Mhm.
So we do have Shelley Bruni on the
That's-
call.
You're looking at $125 a whack, and you're going to be adding probably 2 additional oil changes a year for each bus by even going that step. So that's a significant when it may or may not be needed.
Right.
Why are we paying this vendor dude to make these decisions if we're not going to trust him?
Well, what he did is he came to me and he explained so when they do the full service.
I guess this, my question is, is the person who's making the recommendation also the person who we're paying to change the oil?
Mhm.
Ah,
It's not a person who is a third party who's saying this is what you need to do and somebody else is doing it.
that makes it different.
Yeah,
A
that's
lot
where I was
different, Lonnie. Okay,
Okay, so then maybe what needs to happen is when he does one of these services, then somebody needs to go and see what he's talking about.
Yeah.
Okay,
And that's why I was saying that your operations person waiting till that he's on board, that's exactly what he would be able to do.
Or Shelley, or, some one of the other supervisors.
Yeah.
I just think we need to, and I'm not saying no, I'm just thinking that we need to verify it.
yeah, that's,
yeah.
makes sense.
Alrighty. The other hot topic was the federal vaccine mandate from the Department of Labor, the OSHA order, and which I'm sure you guys have all been following in the news, has been blocked by the court, at least temporarily.
Because it's unconstitutional.
Mhm.
100%.
In the event that that were to change, regardless of, when it changes, it would be really simple for us to modify our COVID policy to include testing for those who are not vaccinated. I would actually recommend for testing for everyone, because they're starting to find that
Mhm.
the vaccinated,
Can still get it, yeah.
they carry it as well. So, just do it straight across the board. And there are places, I think I presented at one of our previous meeting where we can get the single use PCR tests that they can administer themselves in front of their supervisor, and then we would send that off. So that, we're not administering it, but we just might not even get to that point, so. We did have our third TAC meeting, our technical advisory committee for the transit master plan. It was a very good meeting, very interactive. We presented our new routes, and I do have Remix pulled up on the screen. We could, if you wanted to take a look at some of the routes, or we could just.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, and I don't know if we need to.
Can it be shared online so they can see it?
Share
Share screen, yeah.
Multiple participants. One participant can share it, yeah.
And then it should be right here. And here. So
Can you
the,
guys see it online?
Not
No,
really.
no, you can't see it. Okay. Let's go back.
Share screen again.
Go to one participant can share at a time.
Okay.
But I'm still not sure that's the sharing.
It seems off.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see. I wonder if we have to,
There should be some other button to share. Look at more.
who can share? Only host.
That's.
Yeah, look under more.
Where do you see more?
Down
At the bottom of the
There's
three
three
lines, the
dots.
menu.
Oh, more.
No.
Oh, recording.
Mhm.
No. Okay. Yes.
That's just your screen. Right?
Oh,
Just that share screen.
look it up.
It sure should be.
There you go.
There we go. There we go. All right. So the Sutherland route that we're preparing to put into place. So we've got an inbound and an outbound. So, okay, let's go. So it starts at. There we go. At UCC, and it heads on up 99. And so each one of these these dots is it's a stop that we already have established, but what we did is we went through and changed the labels so that they're more specific to the road and the crossroad. So it goes on up through Wilbur, and previously it had gone through this way, made the loop here, come back down and came out this way. So it was a loop right here. And so the people that lived over here could not access shopping and things of that nature and still make it home. They could get one way or the other. So what this one does is it goes up Comstock to Central, and then it comes over here to Fort McKay and across by Ford's Pond, and then down here past where Dairy Queen, Starbucks, and those businesses are. And then it continues on the same path of travel that we used to have to Bimart is our primary stop out there.
Are you thinking that there won't be any stops on the highway?
Oh, no, there would be lots.
Okay.
Which highway?
130 on the west side.
So 138 going,
I mean, there really are no shoulders or sidewalks or anything.
so there's a spot right in here where Dairy Queen is,
Mhm.
where there is it's a lane that is up against the curb, and it's on there's enough room to get between the curb and the fog line, the whole bus. So we could actually make a stop and let somebody off there. It's not optimal. It's not ADA accessible. It's something that we would have to pull forward and actually block a driveway in order for somebody that is in a mobility device. But it does give somebody that's going to work there an option to be able to get there.
So we'll rebuild the interchange there someday, but we put it in periodically for funding on that west side, but the Parkview, which is right over here, will be the signalized intersection.
Whoops. Okay, so that is the danger of. What have I just?
You created a whole bunch of new routes.
Where's the undo
It's as easy as that.
You need the undo button.
Yeah, you have those two arrows down at the bottom.
Does.
Oh, there's an undo.
Yeah,
Undo, undo.
one more.
Unmark.
Somebody was a genius putting that together. Is there parking out there on the west end where people could like park and ride?
Like on the west side of the freeway?
Yeah, where you have your loop for the Ford's Pond.
So it's interesting because there is Highway Haven RV Park right here would be one of the stops. And then all of these streets, they either lead out here or here. So we chose the middle street. Cambridge, I believe is the name of it. And then this one, because somebody here, that would be an out of the way walk to have to get over to that one, and vice versa, you know. Tried to choose spots that were, and then this one over here at Westlake, we can actually make the stop closer to the area where there is parking at Ford's Pond. But there's really not, it's not set up for a park and ride now. But
I guess I was wondering, why wouldn't you go the other direction? Why wouldn't you, so the intersection of Fort McKay and 138 West is not the safest intersection to take a left at. And you're gonna have Evergreen healthcare right there, right on the other side of Fort McKay. So you're gonna have a lot of doctor's office visits that have urgent care and all that big, just like they have here, maybe bigger. And then there really isn't much of anything there, but if you take a left at the left turn lane at Church Street, you know, your Ford's Pond is on the right where you disembark. Right, and and just coming down there, and the crossings are easier for pedestrians to cross. There are no crossings on the highway. So it just kind of seems like it's a little more dangerous to go that way than it would be to go the other direction
So
in terms of crossing the road and.
what we looked at was there's actually a turn lane to get onto Fort McKay.
There is,
But there's not a turn lane to get onto
but
Fort.
it's skewed.
or
Isn't
to
there one
onto
at, I thought
Church.
there was one at church.
Mm-mm.
Oh, okay, I was
No.
thinking there was.
Yeah, so we did try driving, looking both directions. And
Yeah, it just seems like where you, every location you disembark will be on the right if you go the other direction. Otherwise, you're almost requiring them to cross the street, and there are no street crossings, and it's high speed traffic with no shoulders or much of anything to get off of, so,
oh, on 138.
yeah.
So
And I was thinking, especially with the urgent care, you know, that's a place that you're gonna see a lot of people from Sutherland
Is there
Get to-
urgent care there?
that's under construction.
Okay, all right.
So, and a bunch of doctors' offices and things
Yeah, I
like
didn't know that.
you're right, there really aren't any safe places there's no place to do an off-road stop,
Yeah. Mhm.
which is really what we're looking for on a highway where there's higher speeds like that.
I mean, there you can almost do it, if you're going the other direction, you can almost do it at every, well, actually, you know what? Well, yeah, we can almost do it at every, I think we made them come out at Parkview.
Oh, did you?
Yeah,
Okay,
So
but this
Go
also
ahead.
goes to, here, I'll make it smaller so we can move it easier. It'll go 3 times a day over to Oakland. And
okay,
that is a stop that we've already established right here at the gazebo at the park, at the pavilion. And there again, one direction, there are places for flag stops along the way. There are some places where they've made the shoulders wider and paved, probably to accommodate school buses. But going the other direction, there really aren't any places to stop. And so the only real places to stop along going toward Oakland are Union Gap. And then when you get clear down here, almost into Oakland, there's a spot, but
will you identify places at some of these stops where a pullout may be desirable
mhm,
rather than stopping in the travel lane?
mhm.
That would be helpful if the plan pointed that out on some of them where you thought maybe there's some safety issues and a
Okay.
pullout, so when a development comes in, it can be required. Otherwise, the city or ODOT or anybody else doesn't really have anything to hang their hat on.
Okay,
But if you spell that out into the plan, then we can say, yeah, in this plan, it says you need to do this, and then cities and stuff are usually glad to do that.
okay, yes, so we noted.
Right, Mr. Planner? All right.
as long as
Needs to be identified though.
the district's gonna fund it.
Yeah,
Because it's like a city of Myrtle Creek or any of these small cities can't afford to put these type of things in.
well, usually it's on development. I'm just saying when development comes in, you know, they just, when they're
It's
doing the
required.
road stuff, it's required, exactly.
Yeah. So on the times that it goes out to Oakland, it'll do that, swing out to Oakland and then come back. It'll still do the loop over here and then, oh, and that.
What's the time for that travel? If I was on the east side of Sutherland and I want to go to the west side of, say I want to go to Ford's Pond, how long does it take me to get there?
From Weimar.
From Weimar
Yeah,
to over here.
Uh-huh.
I would say I would have to go and look at the time, but it's less than 10 minutes.
okay, and then the whole thing, so if I want to then go back, how, what's the frequency, I guess, of the service?
It's gonna be slightly over an hour.
Okay.
We really wanted it to be right at an hour,
Uh-huh.
but to build in break time and the catch-up time because of the train
Uh-huh.
at the switch station. A lot of times you can get caught at that train certain times of the day for
Yeah,
20 minutes at a time.
Yeah.
So it's really important to have some catch-up time built into the route.
and do they, when they get ahead of it then, because there wasn't a train, do they just kind of rest or sit for a little bit to kind of let them get back on the schedule a little bit?
Yep.
So Mike,
then-
I'm gonna ask you to table some of these questions because they're just, for the
Okay.
sake of time, if you just want to go through them. on the rest.
Yes,
You're right.
so that is, That is Sutherland. And let's see. Back here. And there should be Winston.
There you go.
There we go. All right, so the new piece that we're adding in here is that we are taking Speedway Road over to go past the Ingram Books and then down through where Love's and fast food places are over there.
Mhm.
And then it'll still, this route has never been one to go by UPS and the fast stop there. But because it always made the turn here at FedEx. So now that adds a few more stops on it there. It'll still go on out to make the turnaround at the Old Sunrise. And that serves the River Place area over here on down Carnes Road and out to, as we come into Winston, it goes up Looking Glass and across Abram and then back down to Abby's. And then 3 times a day, possibly 4, it will go out to Dillard and then it just resumes as it comes back in the former path of travel over to the park and then on back. And
Any plans for future expansion into Winston?
future expansion into Winston,
On
like further
the right side,
over here.
yeah.
We have not done that yet.
Future.
Future.
The
So,
Winston section road
yeah,
past Rosai Farms.
yeah. I used to walk that a good quarter of a mile to get to the stop. So, what we had actually been tossing around more so than extending this one that goes back and forth to Roseburg, is for both Sutherland and Winston. At some point in, when ridership demands it, then we would look at doing something like we wanted to do with South County, with the South County collector.
Oh, circulator. Yeah.
Where it would stay in Winston and then it would get catch, you would catch the bus on into Roseburg and have a little bit more localized service. So the one for South County would, what we want to do with this one is make it more of a deviated fixed route. So runs with a smaller bus that can navigate the roads a little bit easier. And then somebody that can't actually make it to the bus stop would be able to call if they were, say, within 3/4 of a mile of the fixed route service there, and the bus would be able to deviate off, pick them up at their home, and then come back on and
Because
make
they
the
have
time.
sidewalks or.
Yeah,
Can you zoom in to the Riddle area?
Riddle.
Yeah.
So it comes in and goes across where the gazebo is here, and then across on 4th Street and Harvard.
Okay, the only thing I would look at, and it's going to be based on demand, is a lot of the employment for 3 major employers are further out. You have RFP, you have the Landing plant, and then you have actually a Green Diamond out there as well.
So we actually have a deviation out to Glenbrook Loop
Yeah.
Road. Yep. It's hard for me to say that one. It is 7 miles out, 7 miles back.
Okay.
So what we do with that is we go when somebody calls and requests the stop. So that is still an option. But if we do the deviated collector, then they would be able to call and say, I need to be picked up on this particular run, the 9 o'clock run or the.
So how would we know
10:30
that?
run.
How would you know that?
They call it into dispatch.
How do they know they can call in and do that? I guess that's what.
Oh, it's on all of the schedules.
Oh,
Mhm. But with the marketing plan that we're gonna develop, one of the things that we're gonna do is get a video made that we can not only put out, just to like on TV, but we could put it out on our website, things that you had mentioned, like how to drop the bike rack,
Yeah.
things of that nature.
So that goes out, I'm guessing Yoakum Road. Is that where that goes out through?
No, it goes over the mountain on Riddle Canyonville.
Okay.
The only time we really take Yoakum Road is
Yeah,
if
and
there's heavy enough snowfall.
What are your stops on Kenny Riddle Road?
So I'm surprised they're not showing up. Okay, so there's one, Dry Creek Canyon, Ash Creek.
Okay.
And I'll have to go and Old Town Road. And then going further, there's Wheat Lane.
Can you go back up? This will be my last thing because I'm holding things up now.
Which one?
Back up in Riddle, and then I'm just trying to catch the major employers. So that Fifth Avenue one. Good.
Oh, yeah, that goes over by the mill.
Yes,
Mhm.
that's another area that I think that really needs to have some exploration because you have C&D and DR on Pruner Road.
Mhm.
And so you're missing several major employers where I could see people wanting to ride it on a loop road, on a loop
Mhm.
down in Myrtle Creek, South County area is
Yeah.
those major employers.
Mhm.
C&D, DR, RFP, and we don't have any stops at any of those.
You might even be able to work with them, those companies, to actually provide bus passes and things like that.
Yes, and eventually, I'm sure ODOT will come out with requirements for, especially once we become an MPO, where we
That's
are,
gonna be a while.
Yeah.
I don't
Is
think
it?
we will be, yeah.
okay.
So that's just, I don't want to waste a bunch of time, but just you can put in the back, look at the major employers in Riddle. I mean, you have 5 mills in there that you're not touching.
Well, so, just in defense of that, our current South County routes, they went back and forth all the way out to Glenbrook,
Glenbrook
Glenbrook Loop.
Loop Road.
That's too, I don't think you can go that far.
GLB.
There's nothing out there.
GLR.
Well, there's the Section 8 housing.
Housing out there?
Yeah. Yeah, so that's why we.
Where's it out there?
That's
Right
where
along
it
the
is,
road.
right after you go across the Singing Bridge.
I would
Yeah.
think potentially you could get more rides going to the industrial sites, so they have hundreds of jobs.
So,
But it's supposed to provide. for it.
the folks that rode to.
You talking about the one that goes over Cow Creek?
You go over Cow Creek and then you go,
You go across
You go
railroad
past the
tracks
nickel
and you
mine.
go past it a little ways and then you turn left
yeah,
and go
you
over
go,
that little bridge.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then there's all
Yeah,
along that
so-
road.
we got a lot of ridership from that
Okay.
area. And then people, they come and go, they don't stay. But the folks that go to RFP, if they ride to RFP, it's for 2 weeks or a month at the most, as soon as they get a paycheck and have their own vehicle.
Like I said, I just put it on the radar.
If
Well, I really think it would be handy for those because a lot of them get DUIs. That is the thing, you go out drinking Friday night.
So that's the
Right
beauty of having deviated fixed route is because they can get on the bus and they can say, okay, I need to go to DR, or I need to go to Herbert Lumber, or I need to go out to RFP, and the bus can deviate and go.
And that's
there.
good that people
Yeah.
can know that.
Yeah.
Is there a way for people to go online and look at this?
This is not ready to go online yet, simply because you can accidentally drag and drop it someplace else.
I don't know who did that.
As we get to this, are we going to, so this talks about here about the Winston-Salem and putting initial notice on the website. Are we gonna advertise anywhere else or somewhere, even if it's radio that drives them to the website, or a sign on the bus, or something like that, but just advertise that these, because I'm not gonna look at the website if they don't ride the bus.
Right.
But if I could drive them to the website,
So what I typically do,
no pun intended.
when we do something big, like this is big to change Winston and Sutherland to close to hourly service, you know?
Yeah.
When we do
Well, even
something like
Roseburg,
that,
the 30-minute.
we do a, and I've got that there too. But we do a news release and then Kyle Bailey always picks it up and that's when he invites me to come and do that. Show where you talk for like
Mhm.
10 minutes, you know, and.
But I'd maybe be a little more proactive than that, whether it's commercial radio advertisements cost nothing.
Yeah.
But just things like that, things that people can see, like I said, an advertisement that hangs on the side of a bus, you got the space,
Mhm.
Yeah.
or even on the buses.
Yeah.
Themselves, but just, or at the bus shelters, but just advertising.
So something that we're doing for our school districts, we're trying to start doing the analytics for a bond, is tagging all of the social media and doing advertising through social media, and it's pretty cheap too.
Yeah,
Yes, it
Where you
is.
can hit, your Facebook, your YouTube.
you get like the zip codes or something,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I would look at that as well. I think and actually that's probably gonna get more bang for your buck than anything else right now.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Where you can just, it gives you the option to, on our Umpqua Transit page, to boost the post.
Mhm.
Yeah, for.
Yeah, it's exactly what it is, yeah.
And this is the change that we will be doing to the red and the green. We're gonna separate the north and south and the east and the west. And sooner than later, we wanted to make sure that they appropriately connect with the Sutherland when it gets to UCC and with the Winston at Washington and Rose. But this will eliminate that big long loop that people ride, and they can make that transfer really easily at Washington and Rose. But they don't have to say if they want to go from right now, if you want to go from Diamond Lake Boulevard down Harvard, you have to, oh no, that's not a good example.
But so when you do that and you
Opposite
create those transfer points, are we working with the city of Roseburg, for example, to set aside those areas for transit parking? And I mean, just as things happen and things change, it'd be nice just to make sure that those are, spaces that are, if Rite Aid ever redevelops or something, that whole building there, it'd be nice to make sure that those spaces are dedicated for transit.
So we have that one block that's dedicated for us.
No, it's not dedicated, it's just there. But if it redevelops, then
So-
people can.
I guess, I sit on this and representing the city of Mill Creek. I've had no contact from the consultants with the city on anything on South County. I don't think Riddle or Caneyville has that either. So that's something I am a little bit disappointed in, is they haven't reached out to the locations to get their input on what they think would be best for their own community that they deal with day in and day out.
It has been my experience, Lonnie, in the last 6 years, that you have to be pushy and you have to go and you have to be aggressive. You can't wait for these people to care.
Well-
And the reason I point that out is that the old Safeway lot and the old Rite Aid lot
Uh-huh.
are owned by the same family. And the city has talked about redeveloping that area and abandoning Rose Street between Douglas and Washington.
Oh,
So yes, you have parking there because nobody's there. But if those sites were to redevelop, that road may not be there. And even if they were there, you may have people parking there to visit the adjacent businesses that are currently closed. So, but by setting aside it as a transit loading zone or something to that effect, it reserves it really for the buses.
Mhm.
So that when buses are coming through, people can't park there and use that, and you have them open all the time.
Mike should be going to the meetings.
Yeah.
It's pretty obvious.
yes.
You need to tell him when they are.
I know
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
that.
All right. So, any questions that I need to answer?
about this, no, I have a question. but not-
Obviously, lots of interest, but yeah.
Yeah,
So, now, how do we go back to?
Are you gonna do the Stewart Parkway one too, because I didn't see that one on there.
Oh, that one. Is,
Get a new color.
I think
Yeah, there's no pink.
it might be this one.
Untitled. I like that.
Untitled.
That's what a lot of my stuff looks like.
Nope, that's not, that's an
No,
overview.
that's not the one. So there is another untitled map. Okay,
Oh,
Wow.
okay.
so yeah, this one starts over in West Harvard, goes
Okay, we hit
across
the movie
by the
theater or-
YMCA, Staples and Bimart, Colony Market.
That's a good route.
Uh-huh.
Walmart, Home Depot.
It's everything.
All
Yeah.
that, yeah. Nice.
So we took it this way across so people could make it to Evergreen that way. But looking for a turnaround.
High density
that-
senior housing over there too, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Looking for a turnaround anywhere in here that's not in a parking lot was difficult. So we brought it back across here by ODOT and then back across the freeway and down past the hospital, Dutch Brothers, the,
Lots of businesses, including In-N-Out Burger.
oh, they're going in there. huh? Yeah.
Supposedly.
My
So,
favorite.
yeah,
Still
and
coming
then
in.
comes back the same way. So, yes, this is definitely
They purchased it.
closer now than it ever has been before.
So if you want to stop sharing, you just hit the red stop up there, stop share, right there.
Stop share.
There you go.
Alrighty, and we're back. Okay,
Who's in the chat?
chat.
We have a message in the chat.
You did get going. RS.
Wrong.
Oh, Ron
Ron
Sperry.
Sperry, okay.
All right. Got it. Okay.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, full screen. There we go. So we have lots of exciting things happening, but nothing out of the ordinary.
Okay, I did want to ask a question.
Mhm.
You have on here about Oregon Buys or whatever they're calling it now.
Mhm.
And we had an email from the city manager over in Reedsport asking about the RFP. And you had responded that it had something to do with the Oregon Buys website.
Yes.
So how is that coming along?
So we did that meeting about a week ago. I invited Jennifer Boardman to join me because she also had not had any orientation to Oregon Buys in the website. So I had literally spent hours and hours and hours, like day after day after day, trying to figure out how to post the RFP to Oregon Buys. And as it turns out, I didn't have the
Authority.
to do
Yeah,
it.
somebody up
because
there has to do it.
they had to add me to it. So as we did the walkthrough, it was really interesting. It is almost exactly the same as Bonfire, the software that we got. Only Bonfire is more user-friendly. And so the end result is we're going to go ahead and do the RFP in Bonfire, post the link to it in Oregon Buys to meet the criteria. And then, but that's something that now that we know, we can complete probably early January. So what I'm going to do is we can post it early January, and then we have to go through that whole process of having it posted, having them respond to it, closing it, scoring their application as the same way that we did with all of the providers. I do not anticipate that anyone else will apply other than City of Reedsport, and I have found some ways to simplify the process, but we still have to go through that whole process. So in the interim, I'm going to offer an extended contract to cover, because they're still providing service. So we want to make sure that we cover them and cover enough time to complete the process. and then enter into the appropriate contract.
Okay, so they're being taken care of in the
Yes.
interim, and we have a timeline, and she's been informed.
I'm
Yes.
surprised they don't know how to do that as a city government. Seems like they would answer RFPs or provide RFPs themselves all the time, and they all have kind of the same requirements, so
Yeah,
whether it's Buy America or, yeah.
yeah, all the federal clauses that go with that. Yeah. It's been interesting.
Yeah.
All right.
But there's like only one contact. When you answer an RFP, there's only one person that you can contact, and they can't create the RFP on their end.
Well, they may have RFPs that they do themselves, but.
Yeah, but they can't do it with us.
Yeah, right.
We have to issue it,
Correct.
and they've been waiting very patiently.
Yes.
I'm just saying, I would think they're familiar with filling them out and stuff like that.
I think it was our end that was not familiar. And I'm still stumbling around in there.
So anything else? Okay. Thank you guys, a very thorough report. Item number 10, ODOT update. Jennifer Boardman.
She is.
Probably went home.
Yeah,
I think we lost her.
Okay.
she had a death in the family.
She's- yeah, she said she's been in and out of the office.
Okay. Anything, item number 11, anything not on agenda that we want to discuss?
I have a question.
Good.
So Cheryl, you had sent out an email the other day on that MTM thing requesting social security numbers from the board members. I'm
Yes.
hoping that was actually a legitimate email that came from you.
So MTM won the RFP for the brokerage. So currently our medical transportation brokerage is Bay Cities. And that changeover was supposed to happen at the first of the year. It's going to happen on the 16th instead. The form that I think I included the instructions, which pretty much shows all of the form. They're saying if there's not an owner to the business, then it has to be the board members. The alternative that I provided for them today is I'm the registered agent for our business.
They should use the EIN number for.
That's what I was gonna suggest. Can we use the EIN numbers instead of our individual social security numbers?
But we have the EIN number on all of the information for the business, but it's the controlling interest.
There's no reason for anybody to have their own personal social security number on there. Everything should be linked to the business.
Well, we're not a corporation, are we? We're a government.
We're government, right?
Yes, so is it even legal for that?
So apparently it is very common practice and he is.
Maybe for nonprofits, but I don't know about a government.
Yeah, government agency, that's-
Is way different than a
Well,
nonprofit.
and I reached out and I just told him that not all of the board members were amenable to providing their social security number. And as the registered agent, it seems as if I would be
I agree.
the appropriate contact.
I agree, if they've got to
So
have that.
that's a question I put out there to him today. I have not received a response.
And
Even for you to put your social security number out there for something that's not, I mean, you're putting yourself at risk by putting your own personal information out
what
there on
does
something that,
special district?
I don't think you need to put it out there.
I don't think so either. I was kind of concerned with that, with them wanting that information.
I was too.
What about special districts? What do they say about this?
This is non-emergent medical transportation. It's the brokerage and I haven't reached out to special districts.
Well, we're a district and we're government and we're going into business.
I would maybe check with Ron or special districts and just see what their recommendation is on personal social security number, because that was alarming.
The whole thing is hinky to me.
The only time I've seen a social security number needed is when you're doing a contract with an individual person or that, but like I said, when you're doing it with the government,
I had to
It's
use
very
my, I had to
unusual.
use my personal social security number to get the EIN for the agency.
For what agency?
When we were, for this one,
Oh, this one?
when we were first applying, that was the only way to get it was to provide something. So I provided money in that. So.
Wow, you've fallen on your sword.
Well, there we
somewhere.
go. Mike volunteers to be the
Lonnie's the chair.
Yeah, and I said no.
I'm working on it.
We'll just
Okay.
wait until.
Yeah.
I would find out what special districts thinks about us being a business.
Or Ron. Yeah, absolutely, I agree.
Okay.
Cause it just doesn't feel right.
Well,
In
it's-
some way, it's weird.
Yes, it seemed off to me, and I asked a lot of questions, and that's what they kept coming back with is we needed to have the, because there is no owner.
Are you talking to the brokerage?
Yeah.
So who's above the brokerage? So, I mean, they obviously are getting money and getting from that, so maybe that's what you talk,
Medicaid.
yeah, so maybe you talk to them and get some information on that, because the person you're talking to at the brokerage may not be too well versed in.
Right.
Where
working
is
with
this
government agency.
MTM base?
So I believe it was Indiana.
Wow, I thought I saw something like that in the paper.
So they're the same brokerage that that took over up in Lane Transit District for their medical transportation and paratransit services as well. So they had all of theirs in one. It was a nonprofit that had been running it for like 20+ years.
Mhm.
And then they went out for an RFP and they're the ones that won the bid. And that was a couple of years ago. So they won the bid against Bay Cities. And
So they could be moving in to try to do paratransit too.
Uh-huh.
well, so if we were to put it out for bid, I'm sure that they would.
I remember being on, when I was on the MedCom board, that's how Bay Cities got in, was they took over, first of all, the VA contract, which was like $800,000. And
Yeah,
then that just about put Fire District 2 out of business for that. And so they had to sell the Bay Cities to focus on
Yeah,
fire.
it seems like this is the Walmart.
And so
of
it seems like the same kind of thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because when I saw Indiana, I said, did we boilerplate this from somewhere else?
no,
And
it comes
they're
from their
really-
home office. And they have, all over the United States. Yeah.
We need to proceed cautiously because we aren't a nonprofit, we are a government.
Yes,
I'm sure there's councils, government or things like that that are providing the same service.
yes.
Any other items for not on agenda? Okay, public comments.
Yes, I do have one.
Sure. Jim? Floor's yours.
Okay, I would like to know who is in charge of keeping the registrations current on the buses. It may be the same bus that I've seen numerous times, but there's one running around with a 2020 license on it.
Yes, and we have been working to get all of those registrations updated. But with COVID, it has been difficult to get all of the titles. And so we're coming down to it. We did 5 more of them this last week and just have a couple more left to go.
Just part of the transfer system from along with ODOT. ODOT's involved in all of this.
Yeah,
Yes,
we didn't have control or ownership of those buses.
Correct.
right.
And there was a grace period, I believe it's ending, I got a letter from
Yeah, it's
DMV, it's ending at the end of the month, so.
Yeah. Yeah, so.
Okay, thank
we are
you.
diligently working on it, but it's taken us darn close to a year.
Thanks, Jim.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Okay, hearing none, we'll move into item number 13, agenda build. So I had 3 things. We will have some bylaws presented for the executive committee that will evaluate. Actually, we're gonna wait for the executive committee to probably meet and review those, then bring them to the board for full approval on that, right?
I thought the bylaws we were gonna do here.
Yeah, I think the board.
And then
has-
we would meet as
Okay.
an executive committee. I think
Okay, so we would go ahead and do the bylaw
Yeah.
approval, so okay, I had that on there.
Because we don't even know who's gonna be the rotating person.
And that was the next thing I had on there is vote for the 3rd member.
Right.
So we'll have to have that, and then the 3rd thing I had on there was the vote on the finance policy with the amendments that we discussed tonight. There's only 3 things I had on there.
one more, I think we were gonna do the general manager review. Weren't we doing that at the first of the year? So we had time to typically, so we would, I mean, there's not much, but to build budgets and things like that, we were gonna try to do that in that kind of time frame. So
Mhm.
even though it's been 6 months or whatever, but it's, yeah.
Well, we're coming right up on.
Well, we had some
the
things that we
Is there,
were,
do
we.
you have a template of the review? Have we done one in the past?
It's on it's on the general manager's thing. There's a review.
Okay.
Or
Can
a
you send
bunch
that out?
of items or something that would review or responsibilities or something. There's something that's right there that can be used.
Okay,
But we also have those SMART goals.
yes,
So looking at the dates and all of that. And so it'd be nice to, Cheryl, if you had like just kind of put some stuff together. So looking at the position description, I think that's where it's attached to. But taking a look at that and the SMART goals and just kind of providing some information based on that. Yeah, there's something it's like the last page of it.
I think we should look some more at those maps and, pick a couple where we're not gonna stretch it out into the middle of the night and do it piecemeal, so that we get a look at all of those routes before the final rodeo.
Well, I think they're doing the TAC is looking, the Technical Advisory Committee is looking at all of that. And you're just about ready to get into alternative development, I think, is what I understand. And so I think those alternatives, I would imagine, will come before they finalize even those, before they finalize the plan. And so they've got all these ideas and typically they'll share those with the board. So
Okay,
we'll have some
They're
input
going
and
to
stuff
do a
into that before they
presentation.
kind of finalize it and start putting that
Okay.
together. Yeah.
It would be good to
And then
have
they
those
drop
maps
it.
sent to us so that we can at least look at them and get some ideas.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
can send those out. That'd be good.
it can turn into a 6-hour marathon.
Yeah, I think there's a link to a website with a lot of that stuff on the project, right? Is there a project website?
There will be, there is, but
Got their
it's as many as you
skeptical
get.
look.
Okay.
I'm skeptical.
Anything else on the agenda, Bill, at this point?
Is there any, let's see, do we need any budget committee members or so we're coming into our budget time and stuff. So is there anything to start building that or looking at that?
so that is a task that is now going to rest firmly with Sherry as. And we have the timeline that was part of our previous financial policy. And I need to check and make sure that, we've retained the same timeline in our new policy. But yes, January is the time frame to put together the timeline for when everything's gonna happen.
Yeah, and then it'd be nice just to have the timeline, so we kind of know what those dates are.
So we'll add that to a timeline for budget committee.
And then the last thing I was thinking about was wasn't on budget at all. It was on something totally different. Coming down the pike. I lost my train of thought.
Okay,
No,
We can always add to it.
exactly. So, all right. I'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting. The time is 7:12. Everybody.
Bug me.
Good night, guys.
Hi, everyone.
No,
Right.